Practically all the phones in the A series lineup for 2022 look alike, especially the A33, 53 and 73. They're basically identical. The camera hardware though is different. The A73 spots a 108 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultrawide, 5 megapixel macro and 5 megapixel depth sensor. The selfie camera is 32 megapixels. So they got rid of the telephoto lens, but there is still a 2x digital zoom which basically crops in from the main sensor. Now, before we dive straight in, I just want to point out that this phone costs 270,000 naira, so our expectations should actually be pretty high. And to a large degree, I think they met it. I really liked the images that came out of this camera. HDR was spot on, it was detailed, color was also really good. It was a pretty close representation of the actual scene. It looked a bit oversaturated in the viewfinder, but after the photo was taken, the image processing got to work and made it look more natural. If the subject is closer to the camera, it would naturally blur the background. I would like to think that's the depth sensor doing its work. I would love to hear your thoughts, obviously, on the photos that you're seeing on your screen. The ultrawide photos also turned out pretty good. Typical with ultrawides, you do get a bit of distortion around the edges, but it's not a big deal. It tried to retain the same saturation with the main camera, but when taking plants especially, you can see that it's definitely more saturated. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I actually kinda like the more saturated look. I also took a few macro shots and, well, it's a 5 megapixel sensor, so you get what you get. I compared the A73 with the XR, and boy was it really close. In some images I actually preferred one over the other, but for most I could go with either. Granted, the A73 really would be going against the iPhone 11, based on price, but I'm certain the difference still wouldn't be that much. And then we have night mode. For the majority of shots you take, you'd actually appreciate Samsung's image processing. It's obviously not as detailed as, the regular shooting mode, and you notice that when you zoom in, but with just the first look, they look pretty good. Now, switching the cameras, let's talk about the selfie. Well, it's pretty good. We have HDR present, and you can definitely notice that when you look at the skies. I mean, it's perfectly exposed, you can still see the clouds, it's actually pretty good. I would say though that it could use a bit more contrast and saturation, because the shirt I was wearing was pretty red, not pink, and when put alongside the XR you can clearly see that. I think the selfie still needs a bit more tweaking, but still pretty good. Okay, so this is the front facing camera shooting in 4K, and based off of what's on the viewfinder, you can see that it's properly exposed. HDR is looking pretty good. I don't know, you tell me, what do you think of the front-facing camera in 4K? Okay, so this is 1080p. I am currently walking. There's a bit of noise. It seems to be stabilized pretty properly. As you can see, the sky as well is properly exposed. What do you think about the front-facing camera in 1080p? Okay, so this is the rear-facing camera shooting in 4K. Oof. As you can see, HDR is doing really well. I think colors are also pretty okay. I mean, that's looking pretty green. The walls look nice. Stabilization is okay, but it does have a super steady mode, but that's only available on 1080p or in 1080p. So let's switch to that now. So this is super steady mode. HDR still present. Colors still looking really nice. Let's see how steady the footage looks. I mean, it is pretty steady. Oof, looks pretty good. But yeah, definitely want to know what you think about the video quality on the Galaxy A73. Video on here is pretty good. I really like 4K on both the front and back cameras. It's pretty stable and looks really good. Now, ultra steady mode is only available in 1080p, but even the 4K one alone is pretty stable. Final thoughts. Boy, are these cameras good, for photos especially. The main camera, you're covered. And selfies are also mainly used for social media. You can also still tweak and edit your photos, so I think it's okay. And then for video, it's also really good. So yeah, that's my A73 camera review. I think these are really, really impressive cameras, especially that main sensor. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you when you see me.